There are three completely different questions here, and most people mix them up. Number one, can you record someone in a public place without their permission? Two, can you publish that footage online? And three, if someone demands it, do you have to delete it? Let's go through them properly one at a time. So question one, can you record someone in a public place without their permission? In the UK, including Scotland, the answer is yes. In most cases, you can. There is no general law that prevents you from filming people in public. If you're standing on a public street, or in a park, on a public path, or flying your drone legally in public airspace, you're allowed to capture what you or your drone can see. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. You'll hear things like, you can't film me without my permission, but that's simply not how the law works. If you're out in public, you're visible to everyone who's around you. Cameras, whether that's on phones, on drones, CCTV, the Google car, vehicle recording devices, don't suddenly make recording illegal. There's no specific law in the UK that says you need consent just to film someone in public. And laws like GDPR, which people often bring up, don't generally apply to individuals filming in a personal or everyday context. But what the law does care about is whether someone has a reasonable expectation of privacy. So out in the open, in the street, a park, a beach, that expectation is very low. But if someone is in a private setting, in their home, in a private garden, or somewhere they reasonably expect privacy, that's where things can change. For drone pilots, this is important. If you're capturing wide aerial shots of coastal, towns, landscapes, and people just happen to be in shot, that's completely normal and perfectly lawful. But where you can run into problems is if your behaviour changes. If you start deliberately targeting someone, following them, repeatedly filming them, that can then cross into harassment. And now we're not looking at drone regulations or drone laws, but other UK legislation. And there are also very specific offences like voyeurism, but those apply to very particular situations and not everyday normal drone flying. So the bottom line is this: if you're filming in a public place and you're doing it responsibly without harassing anyone, you can generally record people without their permission. But, and this is where most people get caught out, filming something and publishing it are two very different things. So the second question, can you publish that footage online without their permission? And this is where things start to change. Just because you can legally record something doesn't automatically mean that you can publish it without consequences. Now, in most everyday situations, yes, you can publish footage taken in public places. If you filmed a street scene, a beach, a landscape, and people just happen to be in the shot, that's generally fine to upload to YouTube or any social media. You're not doing anything unusual, that's just how cameras have always worked. But this is where you need to use a bit of judgment. The first issue is privacy. Even if you're filming from a public place, if your footage shows someone in a situation where they would reasonably expect privacy, publishing that footage can cause problems. For example, someone in their back garden, someone inside their home, or anything that feels private rather than public. That's where you move into what's called the misuse of private information. The second issue is how you present the footage. If you publish a video and suggest that someone has done something wrong when they haven't, that can become defamation. So it's not just the footage, it's the story that you attach to it. Third, harassment. One video, usually not an issue. But if you repeatedly film or target the same person and then publish that content, that's where the risk starts to build. Now, let's deal with one of the biggest myths GDPR. You'll often hear people say, you can't publish that, it's a breach of GDPR. In most cases, that's simply wrong. GDPR is aimed at organisations handling personal data, not individuals capturing everyday footage. And it doesn't give someone an automatic right to stop you publishing a video just because they appear in it. So no, GDPR is not a magic word that people can use to control your footage. The only area where things could shift here is if you are using someone's image to promote a product or service. That's a different situation. But for most normal drone content, that's not an issue. So for drone pilots, if you're posting aerial content, landscapes, coastal routes, lakes, lochs, mountains, the sea, with people just naturally in the scene, you're generally on safe ground or safe air. So the bottom line is this. You can often publish footage taken in public places, but you need to think about context, privacy, and how that footage is used, especially if you are creating a story around the footage and the people in the footage. And that brings us to the final question. If someone tells you to delete your footage or take the video down, must you do that? In most cases, no, you don't. No member of the public has the legal authority to walk up to you and demand that you delete your footage. It doesn't matter how confident they sound or how strongly they may insist, they do not have the power to make you do that. Unless they do have the power to make you do it. But that's another issue, and we won't go into that in this video. The same applies for landowners and security guards. They might ask you to leave the private land, but that's another issue that we dealt with in the previous video. But they can't legally make you delete the footage that you've already recorded. And this is where people get a bit mixed up again. Access to land and ownership of footage are two completely different things. Now, when it comes to the police, they do have certain powers, but they're specific and they're not used casually. In some situations, they may be able to seize equipment or footage as part of an investigation. But that's different from someone telling you to delete your footage on the spot. The police don't just turn up and say, delete that. That's not how it works. But there is a situation where your video can be taken down. And that's happened to me on a number of occasions. Sometimes I've appealed and had the videos reinstated, and sometimes I just haven't bothered because it was more trouble than it was worth. And that's by the platform that you upload it to. For example, YouTube. If your content breaches YouTube policies for privacy, for example, or copyright, they can remove it. But again, that's not the same as a random person coming up to you demanding that you delete footage that you have already recorded that they happen to be in. So if someone walks up to you and says, delete that footage now, you don't have to. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use responsible and sensible judgment, particularly about this situation, which may be very different from another situation. Sometimes it's better to de-escalate. Sometimes it's just not worth the argument. But that's your decision and not theirs. So, to summarise, you can usually record people in public. You can often publish that footage online. And no, people cannot demand that you just delete it. Filming, publishing and deleting footage are three different legal questions. And once you understand that, you're in a much stronger position when these things happen.